In a quiet corner of the world, far from the restless noise of cities and the winding roads of kingdoms, there lies a small village. It's a place untouched by time, where the air feels thicker with memory, and the trees seem to watch you with ancient, knowing eyes. The village is cradled between rolling hills and dense woods, and most maps leave it blank, as if the cartographers themselves could never quite find it. The village is called Eldermere. Here, time moves differently. The days unfold slowly, each one shaped by the rising and setting of the sun, the seasons, and the steady pulse of the earth. There's a hush to this place, a softness that settles over its cottages and fields like a familiar shawl. The earth smells of moss and wildflowers. The skies shimmer at dawn, and in the evening, the horizon blushes with color so rich it could make even the most hurried traveler pause. The homes of Eldermere are built of stone and timber, their walls softened by ivy and age. Roofs are made of thatch, thick and golden, and the windows wear flower boxes bursting with blooms that change with the season. Daisies and marigolds in the spring, wild roses in summer, tiny asters and forget-me-nots as autumn turns. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, and the scent of wood smoke clings to the air like an old friend. Mornings in Eldermere begin with the soft glow of first light spilling over the hills, painting the mist in hues of pink and lavender. The air feels cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and fresh grass. Somewhere, a rooster calls to welcome the sun, its voice rough but proud, marking the start of another simple, beautiful day. The chickens stir in their coops, pecking at bits of straw. Cows in the distant fields lift their heads, their breath misting in the chill air, while the horses at the edge of the wood stamp their hooves and flick their manes, eager for the day to begin. Osric the baker is always the first to wake. His small round cottage sits near the heart of the village, its stone walls warm and solid, its windows wide and often open to let the air in. Before dawn, he's already tending to his ovens, the heat licking at the walls as he shapes dough with hands practiced by years of repetition. The scent of baking bread is one of the village's unspoken promises. It winds between the cottages, curling through windows and slipping beneath doors, gently urging the villagers from their sleep. The smell is warm and familiar, like the arms of an old friend, reminding each soul that another day awaits. His wife, Mara, brews spiced tea in a clay pot by the hearth. It's strong, dark, and filled with herbs from her own garden, lavender, mint, a touch of cinnamon bark. Those passing by early often pause at Osric's doorway, drawn by the scent and the promise of warmth. She welcomes them with a nod and a smile, passing earthen mugs into hands roughened by labor and softened by kindness. Further down the lane, Edith the weaver begins her own quiet ritual. She sits at her loom near the wide window where morning light spills in. Her small cottage smells of wool, beeswax, and the sharp green scent of drying herbs. Lavender bundles hang from the rafters, swaying softly with every breeze. The loom speaks a steady rhythm, the clack and slide of wood, the sigh of thread pulling tight. Her yarn is dyed with colors pulled from the land, ochre from crushed marigold petals, sage from leaves, blues from berries and flowers whose names are lost to time. Her work is slow and careful, but never hurried. In Eldermere, no one hurries. Outside, the fields wake with the sun. The earth here is rich and dark, eager to grow, and the farmers who tend it move between rows of vegetables and grains with steady hands. They pluck weeds, gather what the land has offered, and leave quiet words of thanks with every harvest. Children run barefoot along the edges of the fields, chasing one another through tall grass, their laughter light and bright, catching on the wind like drifting leaves. They collect small treasures, smooth stones, wild berries, a feather from a passing bird, and invent games with rules known only to them. As the sun climbs higher, the village settles into its rhythm. The blacksmith's hammer rings from his forge, shaping iron tools and nails, while his young apprentice pumps the bellows with eager hands. The scent of hot metal mingles with the sweetness of clover in the air. In the square, old men gather beneath the great oak, a massive tree older than any living soul in Eldermere. Its branches stretch wide, its leaves whispering secrets only the earth remembers. The men sit at a weathered table, playing a slow game of stones. Their faces are lined and tanned, their eyes bright with the kind of humor born from years, and the simple pleasure of one another's company. Each move of the game is made with consideration, though the conversation matters far more than the game itself. By midday, the village grows still. The animals doze in shaded corners, and the streets empty save for the occasional figure moving softly from house to house. The air hums with warmth, carrying the scent of sun-warmed wood, earth, and distant flowers. Insects drift lazily in beams of light that filter through trees and across stone walls. Many of the villagers retreat indoors for a simple meal. Stews of root vegetables, bread fresh from Osric's ovens, and sweet fruits from the orchards. Windows remain open to the sound of leaves rustling and bees moving from bloom to bloom. The heat of the day lingers until late afternoon, when a breeze stirs the leaves and the village breathes again. Women gather at the well, their buckets clanking softly against the stone as they draw water. The water is cold and clear, and its sound is a small, constant music in the background of Eldermere's days. They speak in soft voices, sharing news of the weather, which child came down with a fever in the night, whose hens have started laying early. Remedies are passed quietly from one to another, a poultice of chamomile and mint for sleeplessness, a syrup of elderberries and honey for sore throats. There's no need to hurry the words here. Every conversation unfolds in its own time, every laugh shared easily. Even the silences are comfortable, resting in the warmth of companionship. As evening approaches, the sky deepens into shades of rose and indigo. The hills catch the last of the sunlight, and the trees along the edge of the village cast long, dappled shadows across the fields. Slowly, lanterns are lit. Their soft glow spills from windows and doorways, painting halos of light against stone and timber. The scent of wood smoke thickens in the air as hearth fires are stoked for the evening meal. Families gather around simple tables. The meals are hearty and uncomplicated. Stews thick with tender meat and vegetables, loaves of dark bread, and small bowls of honey or jam. A pitcher of cider or cool spring water sits within easy reach, and the only expectation is presence. Voices soften as the meal progresses. Old stories are shared, often ones everyone has heard before, but their retelling is as cherished as the bread on the table. A few old songs are hummed between bites, voices joining in low, tuneless harmony. The day's work is behind them, the night's quiet ahead. The children fall asleep first, tucked beneath blankets Edith has woven, their small hands clutching soft toys made from scrap cloth and straw. The adults linger by the fire, speaking of the next day's weather, a neighbor's new foal, or the odd pattern of stars in the evening sky. Outside, the village settles into quiet. The crickets begin their nightly chorus, and an owl calls from somewhere beyond the fields. The lanterns burn lower, and the sounds of the village fade, replaced by the hush of night. In Eldermere, the night is never fully dark. The stars shine with an old, steady light, scattered thickly across the heavens. Their reflection dances in the stream that winds past the fields, and in the small pond near the weaver's home. It's in this hour, beneath the weight of the night sky, that Eldermere feels closest to the earth. The old oak tree stands silent and watchful in the square. The fields breathe under the blanket of mist that begins to gather. The world seems to pause, held in the perfect stillness between one breath and the next. Those who walk the lanes at midnight can hear the stream's soft rush, the occasional creak of a shutter, the leaves whispering secrets to one another. And if they listen closely, they might hear the earth itself humming a deep, patient song. Here in Eldermere, the world slows, the heart quiets, and time for a while forgets to move forward. Another dawn will come, the rooster will crow, bread will bake, the loom will clack, and the cycle will continue, as it always has. A place untouched by haste, a quiet corner of the world, a soft, perfect pocket of peace, where you, too, are always welcome. Night had settled fully over Eldermere, wrapping the village in a cloak of gentle darkness. The stars above shimmered in the deep velvet sky, as countless as the leaves in the old forest, each one a steady pinprick of light. Their glow reflected in the narrow stream that curved lazily through the fields and into the woods beyond, its waters silver and smooth, carrying whispers downstream to places no villager had ever walked. The night air was cool and soft, carrying the clean scent of damp earth, hay, and the faint sweetness of wild flowers that still clung to the hedgerows. Crickets sang their constant rhythmic tune, a simple lullaby for those who slept behind shuttered windows. An owl called now and again from the branches of the ancient oak at the heart of the square, its voice deep and measured, marking the passing of the hours. The village lanes lay empty, save for the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a wandering breeze. Curtains hung still in windows, catching the pale starlight. In some cottages, small embers still glowed in hearths, the last warmth of the day flickering faintly. There was no sound of voices now, no clang of hammer on anvil, no creak of loom or splash of water at the well. Only the quiet, the living, breathing hush that settled over Eldermere each night, as steady and dependable as the seasons. But though the village rested, the land beyond remained alive in its own way. In the fields, a few night creatures stirred. A pair of rabbits, soft-furred and silent, nibbled at tender shoots in the garden edges. A fox padded gracefully along the tree line, its coat silver in the moonlight, eyes glinting as it paused to drink from the stream. Even the trees seemed to hum softly, their leaves murmuring secrets to one another in voices too old and quiet for human ears. The forest beyond the fields was darker still, thick with ancient trunks and moss, where the air cooled and thickened, and the scent of pine and damp earth clung to everything. In a small cottage on the outskirts of Eldermere, a woman named Ellen sat by her window, watching the sky. She was known for speaking to the stars, though none could tell if they ever answered. Her hair was long and silver, her hands fine and weathered, and her eyes held the color of the evening sky, a shade somewhere between blue and gray. She kept no livestock, planted no fields. Her work was in herbs, in roots pulled from deep forest soil, and in leaves gathered under certain moons. Those with fevers, with restless sleep, or with hearts too heavy to bear would come to her door in the evening, offering small gifts, a skein of thread, a loaf of bread, a jar of honey, in exchange for a salve, a potion, or a soft-spoken word. Tonight, she held no work in her hands. Instead, she gazed upward, her lips moving in slow, soundless words. The stars shifted in their ancient courses, and if any meaning passed between them and Elin, it remained their quiet secret. The night stretched on. Within the cottages, dreams settled upon sleeping villagers like mist. The old men beneath the oak dreamt of their younger days, of chasing fireflies and racing barefoot through the fields under a younger sun. The children dreamed of rivers made of honey, of talking animals, and of hiding places in the woods where no grown-up could find them. Osric dreamt of fields heavy with wheat, taller than his head, and Mara dreamt of her mother's kitchen long ago, where the scent of cloves hung thick in the air. Edith the weaver dreamed of her grandmother's stories, the ones she had half forgotten but which came to her again in sleep, full of forgotten places and old magic. The night passed gently. As the first light of dawn began to press against the horizon, a soft mist rose from the fields. It clung to the earth like a pale silken blanket, moving in slow curls across the land. The sky shifted from deep indigo to the softest shade of gray, then into faint pink, and with it came the world's slow awakening. The first to stir was, as always, Osric. He rose before the sky turned gold, his joints aching in the familiar way of age, but his heart as steady as it had been in his youth. The bread had to be made, after all, and the ovens stoked. He made his way to the small bakehouse behind his cottage, the ground damp beneath his feet. He smelled the earth, the river, and the faint sweetness of the mist. The fire caught quickly, and soon the warmth filled the room, chasing away the dawn's chill. By the time the sun's first rays touched the tips of the hills, Mara was awake, her kettle already warming over the embers of last night's fire. She set about her morning tasks, hands moving from memory rather than thought, gathering herbs from her window boxes and washing yesterday's mugs. The mist lingered a while, reluctant to leave, clinging to the hedgerows and the corners of cottages, before slowly lifting into the warming air. The light softened everything it touched, turning stone walls to gold and making dew on the grass shimmer like scattered beads. The rooster crowed, proud and sharp, breaking the hush with his call. Villagers began to emerge from their homes, some stretching, others tending to animals still blinking against the light. The hens were released from their coops, the cows led to pasture, and small dogs darted eagerly through the lanes. At the well, the first few women gathered to draw water, their voices soft and low, speaking of the mist, of a restless child, of a plant that had begun blooming too early. They carried baskets and buckets, their skirts brushing against the wild herbs that lined the path. Children, their hair still mussed with sleep, began to appear as the sun climbed higher. They carried small woven baskets for berry picking or simply to collect whatever treasures they might find. Sticks, feathers, smooth stones, the treasures of a simple world. The morning unfolded gently. The blacksmith began his work, the steady ring of his hammer marking the hour. The weaver sat again at her loom, the loom's steady clack a comforting heartbeat to those who passed by her cottage. Farmers moved into their fields, sleeves rolled and feet bare, their faces turned toward the sun. Near the stream, Ellen moved slowly along the water's edge, gathering herbs and leaves. She spoke softly to the plants, thanking them, as was her way, before placing them in a woven pouch at her side. The mist had left the leaves heavy with droplets, and her fingers brushed them aside with care. She paused now and then, her gaze lifting toward the trees or the sky, as though listening for something only she could hear. At midday, as warmth settled over the land, the village fell into its gentle lull once more. Meals were taken in the shade of trees or at kitchen tables, simple dishes of stew, bread, and fresh greens. Laughter rippled now and then across the fields as children played, and the old men resumed their game beneath the oak. It was a day like so many before it, unremarkable to any hurried traveler, yet perfect in its simplicity. The earth turned, the sun passed overhead, and the villagers moved through the hours as naturally as breathing. In the late afternoon, a gathering took place in the square. A boy had come of age, his 14th year marked, and as was custom, a small circle of neighbors and kin formed around him. There was no grand feast, no towering cakes or fine garments. Instead, he was gifted a simple knife with a carved wooden handle, a symbol of his step into the duties of his people. Osric gave him a loaf of bread, warm and crisp. Edith presented a cloth pouch she had stitched. Ellen, in her quiet way, placed a single sprig of rosemary into his hand, murmuring words no one else heard. The boy's mother wept, as mothers do, though her eyes shone bright with pride. The boy stood tall, his shoulders squared, and though his voice trembled as he spoke his thanks, it carried clearly in the summer air. As evening approached, the village slowed again. The fields were left to rest, animals gathered into their pens, and the sky shifted to the dusky hues of twilight. The villagers took their places around tables and hearths, voices low, the air thick with the scent of cooking, earth, and the coming night. The old stories began again. Tales of the hills, of the stars, of beasts with glowing eyes and forests that moved when no one watched, of the great oak that had stood in the square since the world was young. The children listened wide-eyed, though they'd heard the stories a dozen times before. Their hands clung to their blankets, their heads resting against a mother's shoulder or a father's knee. And outside, the first stars appeared once more. The cycle continued, and Eldermere, cradled between its hills and woods, forgotten by maps but remembered by the earth itself, breathed on. The night would come again, the mist would rise, and the dawn would follow, as it always had, as it always would.